Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to yet another week of the Nothing But Nugs podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. We're going to continue walking through our recap episodes, walking through the Denver Nuggets roster from 2025, 2026, and giving our perspective on each individual contributor's performances from the past season. So thus far, we've talked about the point guards, we've talked about the shooting guards, and we've talked about the small forwards. But today, instead of getting to the power forwards and centers separately, we're just going to combine them together because it just makes it that much more fun. The more the merrier. And with me yet again, Eric, how's it going? Another Friday of talking Nuggets basketball.
Yeah, another Friday. Blessed to see it. It's like I said, it's we've turned the page into June now, and you got NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals. This is just a great time of year for sports. So super excited to be here, though.
It really is. Yeah, you'll love to see it. We got the NBA Finals going on. We got the Stanley Cup Finals going on. Baseball's getting into summertime, which is everybody's favorite time to watch at the ballpark. But yeah, we have a fun, exciting episode to get to today. So I think we might as well just dive right on into it. But before we do, I will remind everybody that if they don't follow us on social media yet, you should go ahead and do that. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, either this podcast or the Elevated Pulse Sports YouTube channel, you should go ahead and do that as well. We're here every week besides next week. That's an announcement. We'll be taking next week off, but we'll be back with some draft coverage leading up to the NBA draft in about 2 weeks or so. So with that said, let's get into today's episode and start talking about some Nuggets bigs from 2025, 2026. This has probably been, for obvious reasons, the most stable position group, arguably, of all the position groups, mostly because of a guy that, we'll get to a little bit later on in this episode, who just happens to be one of the best basketball players in the entire world. But let's start with the power forwards, and let's start with Aaron Gordon. Now, we'll start with the fours. Aaron Gordon, by pretty much every opinion that you'll see out there in NBA world, did not have the season that you hoped he would have. And it's not necessarily because his production was bad. It's just because he wasn't out there on the court enough to produce. Only played 36 games in 2025, 2026, averaged 16 points a game, 50% from the field, 39% from three, 77% from the free throw line, to go with 6 rebounds, 3 assists, roughly a turnover, less than a steal and a block a game, and a plus minus of 7.6. Now, as far as the shot types he took, 61% of the shots he attempted in 2025, 2026 were 2-pointers, and 39% were from 3-point range. So, Eric, at the outset here, what are we thinking about Aaron Gordon's 2025, 2026 season?
I mean, look, when Aaron Gordon played, he was good. It was just the challenge, as you said, only playing 36 regular season games. It was the challenge of him not playing that really hurt this Denver Nugget team. You look back to the championship season, and I mean, it's hard to argue that there's been a better glue guy than Aaron Gordon over that period of time. He does a lot of the dirty work, so to say, on defense. He's a pretty good defender. He can guard really just about any position. He is a big body underneath, very physical and very strong. So when he's not on the court, you miss it on both ends. You miss it on the offensive side, kind of, whether it's in that dunker position that he's grown so accustomed to. He plays so well off of Nikola Jokic. But then you've seen over the last couple of years, I think you touched on it with his 3-point percentage. He's really expanded his ability to shoot the ball. So those are the kinds of things that, kind of stick out to me is, when you look at 3-point percentage, 38.9%. Now, that was down from 43.5% the prior year. But I think a lot of that, it's kind of the same thing with Christian Braun. When you deal with lower body injuries, whether that's your hamstring, your ankle, whatever it is, that affects the way you shoot the ball. People think, oh, well, it's the upper body that impacts your shooting. It's really your lower body that gives you all the push and the ability to have the strength to get the ball up there. That power comes from underneath, your legs, your hamstrings, because Aaron Gordon plays such a physical style of game. When he's not out there, the Nuggets really don't have another person that can just slide in and fill that role. They're really missing a big piece, a big cog in their wheel, so to say, when he's not out on the court. And you could feel it this year. You could see it didn't necessarily affect Denver's ability to be able to score, but where it really affected it, I think, is you could see it on the defensive end. They couldn't rely on a stopper. They didn't have somebody they could just put on, the best player on the other team and say, okay, that's the guy you're guarding. We don't have that outside of Aaron Gordon. So it was a tough stretch to have him not out on the court. But when you look at his numbers, when he was on the court, he was awesome. He's everything that you had hoped he would be. He's averaged 16 points a game, like you said, and that's in fewer minutes than last season. So his efficiency is through the roof. His usage jumped up a little bit, which was a little bit of a surprise to me when I kind of was looking at his breakdowns. It's not that it skyrocketed. He went from a 19% to 22% usage when he was out on the court. So, those are signs that the team trusts him when he's out there. The problem is he just wasn't out there enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had us all fooled after the very first game of the season, against Golden State, national television. Overtime loss, I'll grant it. But 50 points on 17 of 21 from the field and 10 of 11 from three. We were like, oh my goodness gracious, Aaron Gordon is for real this season. Like, not that he hadn't been the previous few seasons, but my goodness, there's like a different level that the Nuggets have now. And that's really something we were excited about, because having traded Michael Porter Jr. away, you weren't necessarily sure if you were going to get the same offensive output from your forwards unit. But for him to come out of the gate on absolute fire, offensively and defensively, I suppose, but particularly offensively, that really gave us a solid hope that the core, or the big three now, that would now be Jokic, Murray, and Gordon, would actually be enough to contend for a championship even without a Michael Porter Jr. And then at that point, he actually kind of had a week or two in there at the outset where he kind of just struggled to shoot after that initial 50-point game. Then he started to pick it up a little bit. So you saw some 20-point games in early November and then in mid-November, before eventually he went down in the first few minutes of the game against Houston with that injury, and he came back on January 4th. So a tough stretch there for Aaron. But overall, yeah, when you think of Aaron Gordon, he just plays such an important role for this team offensively and defensively. For whatever reason, it felt like last season they didn't go to the little lob play as much from the dunker spot, which was kind of annoying for me, because I really love that play. Whenever Joker gets doubled, you always have that opportunity for him to just float it up there and Aaron will just yam it home. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that as often in 2025, 2026. So that was a little bit annoying. But aside from that, he's still a solid shooter. He's become a much better shot creator too, which is, I think, the reason why he's become a better shooter overall. It's not just that he's worked on his shot, he's worked on getting to his spot and knocking his shots down a lot more consistently. You saw 2023, 2024, he shot 29% from the 3-point line. And then the very next season came out, shot 44% in almost 2 times as many attempts per game. And so Aaron has really turned into a nice offensive and defensive piece for this team. That's really why they got him initially, was more so for that defense, because they needed a 4 who could play defense against some of the tougher bigs in the West. But it's just unfortunate that he couldn't stay healthy. And that's really kind of been a trend, not just last season, but even the season before that. You look at 2023, 2024, he played 73 games. Next season, he played 51. And then last season, he played 36. And this is not a good trend for a guy who's now going into his early 30s. Is that a massive concern for you at this point in Aaron Gordon's career and this Denver Nuggets team their current situation just overall with roster flexibility and cap space?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is. Unfortunately, I look. I love Aaron Gordon. I think though, Father Time's undefeated. So it's you're not going to find a guy, especially when you get on that other side of 30 in the NBA. The NBA is a young man's game. Look at the teams in the NBA Finals right now. San Antonio, they're not supposed to be there, right? Nobody. I mean, I guess you have Wemby, so they always had a chance, but nobody. I don't think a ton of people would have gun to the head type of situation. You're betting on San Antonio to knock out OKC. Um, but they're the youngest team in the NBA with the average age, I think, is right around 22, 23 years old. They're actually younger than the Michigan team that won the NCAA championship this year, which is kind of crazy to think of. Uh, so when you start to think about that and put it into perspective with Aaron Gordon, you're on the other side of 30. You've had consecutive years where you've struggled with injuries. And let's be honest, it's been roughly the same injury twice, both years. It's been that hamstring, it's been the calf. And so you do worry about it when he's supposed to be one of your big three, and he is certainly taking up, a good portion of that salary cap. So, is he going to be able to continue to play at a high level for long periods of time? I don't know. That's where I think the Nuggets, they wouldn't be doing themselves any justice if they weren't out there looking for alternate options, because there's bound to be deals out there. There's one man's trash is another man's treasure type of thing. Aaron Gordon still probably has enough in the tank where he can go be really good in situational basketball. The team that comes to mind off the top of my head, this is doing like no research, is just the Boston Celtics. Somebody like that where they can come in and kind of plug him in. He's not going to be a guy who's going to have to go out there and run their defense. He's not going to have to be the best defender on the court. He can just kind of fit in, and he doesn't have to play tons of minutes. I think that's the kind of situation Aaron Gordon is probably leaning towards as we move into kind of what I would say is more the twilight of his career. I'm not saying he's there yet, but in the next 2 seasons, 3 seasons, I think that's kind of when he's getting there. So the Nuggets should be looking right now at what are the options out there for them, because I think we relied so much on him over the last 2 years, and it's just you want to be able to count on somebody that can be there, and unfortunately, it's not because he doesn't want to be there; it's his body is failing him at this point.
Yeah, it's a tough situation that the Nuggets find themselves in, right? Because you're moving on from a guy who became a core piece on your championship team. And now you're facing the very, very real possibility of getting rid of him simply because he can't stay healthy. And you're dealing with all this cap inflexibility and a lot of other important pieces that you might need to go get or that you're trying to retain. Maybe if you're thinking Peyton Watson, something to that effect. That said, as far as AG is concerned, did he meet expectations in 2025, 2026? And do you want him back on the team again in 2026, 2027?
So I'm a little torn here because look, did he meet expectations when he was on the court? Yes, I feel like he did. The problem was he didn't even play half the games, so it's hard to give him a meets expectation grade if you don't show up at least half the time. They put those 65 game rules in for a reason with regards to the qualifying for all NBA teams and MVP and things like that. Well, you kind of have to look at it the same way with regards to how you feel about bringing him back for another season. At least I do. I would love if we had a healthy Aaron Gordon, but I just don't know that we're going to be able to ever count on having a fully healthy Aaron Gordon for 82 games. I don't think that that's going to ever be the case as we move forward. So I would love to have him back. but I don't know that we're going to have him back simply because I think they're going to explore other options to try to find somebody younger, healthier, and somebody who might be able to give them a little bit more of that cap flexibility like you talked about.
Yeah, yeah, interesting perspectives. It'll be interesting to see which of those three between Christian Brown, Cam Johnson, and or Aaron Gordon get moved this offseason. As far as AG meeting expectations, yeah, I agree. I think he met his expectations when he was on the court. Played really solidly on both sides of the ball, continued to shoot well from three, even with increased attempts per game from beyond the arc. So as far as his performance, yeah, he was great when he was on the court. Do I want him on the team again in 2026, 2027? Here's the thing, right? Yeah, I wouldn't say you got to get rid of Aaron just for the sake of getting rid of Aaron, right? If you're going to get rid of Aaron Gordon, you got to go out and get a four who's a very defensive minded four. There are very few reasonable upgrades at the power forward position that you could reasonably go out and get from a play style perspective, right? How many other power forwards out in the NBA who you could reasonably go and make a trade for can shoot nearly 40% from three and play really high quality defense? Not very many. So you're probably going to be giving up one of those two, right? Either shooting or defense. You got to make sure you're not giving up the defense here. You got to go out and get a four who can play solid defense in his stead. So I think as far as me wanting him back, since it's probably not likely they're going to go out and get someone who's better at the four this offseason, I think I'd probably like to see him come back. Now, if you could swing a trade, I think we mentioned this in one of the last few episodes, but if you could find a trade for someone like an Evan Mobley, who's a solid defensive power forward center type of player who could play alongside Nikola Jokic, that's a trade for Aaron Gordon that I would take hands down, something to that effect. Because, I mean, the fact that Mobley is not a great shooter isn't necessarily the largest concern that I have. I mean, he's only 24 years old, so he's got plenty of time to keep working on his shot. And this Nuggets coaching staff is very offensive minded. So if you were to go and find a guy like that, the lack of offense wouldn't concern me. But other than that, if you're not going to go find someone who can play that caliber of basketball on at least one side of the floor at the four, then I think I'd like to keep AG in 2026, 2027. But moving on to, at least on the depth chart, you might figure AG's backup in 2025, 2026, although he didn't really see the court a ton until all the injuries started to happen. Zeke Naji. Zeke Naji, obviously former first round pick of the Denver Nuggets back in, what was it, 2020, 2021, I think.
Yep.
Did just not have a good season yet again, at least compared to some of the expectations we had and some of the flashes that he showed earlier on in his career. He just continues to not really perform consistently at a bare minimum. In 2025, 2026, averaged 4 points per game, 47% from the field, 26% from the three-point line, 77% from the free throw line, 3 rebounds a game. Rounded up, you give him an assist a game, about a half a turnover, less than a steal and a block, and a negative 2.1 plus minus. Most of his shots were taken, obviously, inside the three-point line, 64% from two-point range compared to 36% from beyond the arc. Man, Zeke Naji is kind of a very interesting situation, right? He's now completed 6 seasons in the NBA, believe it or not, which is actually crazy to think about. Got that 4-year, $32 million extension, I think it was, about 2 years ago. And it's just kind of been a waste of cap space, all things considered, ever since that happened. And I'm kind of curious to hear what your perspective is on Zeke. I know there's not much performance-wise necessarily to talk about, but just what do you think of Zeke Naji overall and his role on this team?
Yeah, I was not a fan when they gave him the extension, and it's nothing against him personally. For me, it's just the eye test. There's guys that I can, and I'm not claiming to be some professional scout or anything like that. I'm just a fan. But sometimes when you, as a fan, see guys on the court, you can pretty quickly distinguish whether or not they are the kind of guy that's going to be able to help your team when you need them to. And I've just never been able to see Zeke Najee as some, big time player that's going to get you crunch time points or rebounds or anything like that. Now, have we seen spurts where he's played good? Yeah, absolutely. But ultimately, when you talk about Zeke Najee, uh, for me, he's not going to be a guy that you can count on to be part of your main rotation. He just doesn't shoot the ball well enough. He's kind of like the perfect in between type of guy. They need they really need somebody who has his athleticism, kind of the length of maybe a Peyton Watson type of player, that can either do one of two things: knock down shots or play unbelievable defense. And I think that that's kind of, they wanted Zeke Najee to be a little bit of both of those. And it turns out he's really neither of those. He doesn't play lockdown defense. You see him when he's out there. And again, this is, I'm not claiming to be a scout. This is just from a fan's eye. There are times where Zeke Najee looks lost on defense. He doesn't, and then there's other times where he's extremely gifted athletically. There's no doubt about that. So his athletic abilities make up for some of that, right? Because he can jump through the gym. He does a decent job of rebounding. But that number that you said with regards to his 3-point shooting, I knew it wasn't good. But last year he shot 32.7%. Sorry, 2024-25, and then 25-26 it dropped down to 25.9%. That's a huge problem for the Nuggets. If he's ever going to be a rotational type of player in the Denver ecosystem, he's either got to be, like I said, kind of that vertical athlete / rim protector type of player on defense, or somebody that they can count on to knock down shots. And unfortunately, I don't see that in Zeke Najee.
Yeah. And so here's the thing that I note about Zeke, right? Obviously, there's a reason he's on this team, and it's not just because he's being paid $8 million a year, even though he's not really been a consistent rotational player since getting that extension. He gives a ton of effort every single time he's on the court. And so it's for that reason, pretty much alone, that he's still on this team. Every time he gets out on the court, he is very active. Like you mentioned, he's very athletic. He does his best to maximize his physical gifts for sure. But I mean, the largest issue that you note with his game, at least, is that it just feels like he's out of place, like you mentioned, a lot of the time, especially on defense. But he's out of place because he's just off rhythm. And it's kind of strange for him, right? I know I play piano for fun. That's a hobby of mine. I know he's a big piano player. He's a really good piano player too. And so for that reason, it's kind of strange that he seems to always be like a half step behind wherever it is that he's supposed to be. And I don't know if that's something you can fix. I mean, he's 6 years into his career, and that continues to be a trend. And so my presumed answer to that question would be no. But I mean, it's just such a frustrating situation because, again, here's a guy who was drafted in the first round. It needed some depth at the 4-5. He's kind of played a little bit of both occasionally, depending on what the team needs on any given night. But I mean, ever since then, he's just always kind of been out of rhythm. He's just never been in the flow of the offense consistently enough to the point where he can truly demonstrate that he can be a rotational player in any capacity. And as far as his 3-point shooting is concerned, I mean, his first 2 seasons in the NBA, he shot over 40%. He shot 46% from 3 in his second season. And that was super exciting. But here's kind of the strange thing about that is, I don't know if you remember this, but during the 2022 offseason, after his second season, even though his jump shot was effective, it didn't look the prettiest. And the coaching staff at that time, Michael Malone's staff, worked on his shot for some reason. They altered it almost completely. They completely reinvented his jump shot. And since then, he's not shot more than 33% from 3 in any season. And I mean, I guess his free throw percentage has gone up. He shot 63% from the free throw line in his second season. The season he shot 46% from 3. Those numbers have gone completely the opposite. He's shot better from the free throw line now than he has from three. And so it's really unfortunate that he's kind of just been doomed from a player development perspective too. I mean, like, why would you? I get that his jump shot was ugly, but there's no reason to mess with the jump shot of a guy who's in his first 2 seasons has shot over 40% from three, no matter how ugly it looks. So it's just unfortunate the situation that Zeke finds himself in at this point in time. As far as did he meet or exceed expectations in 2025, 2026? What do you think? And do you want him on the team again in 2026, 2027 if you had the choice?
I mean, I don't personally think he met expectations because, as you said, for somebody who was coming into their 6th season, you had hoped to see growth, and we just don't see that growth. And look, sometimes for guys, professional athletes, all they need is a change of scenery. Because I love what you said about Zeke. He is an extremely hard worker. You can tell he goes out there and he hustles and he tries very hard. It's not due to lack of effort. I'm sure, again, I'm not at their practices, but I'm sure at practice, he's putting in that same kind of work. Sometimes it's just a change of scenery that's needed. He needs to hear other voices, maybe not necessarily the Nuggets coaching staff. So, I don't think he met expectations, but I will say that kind of with, a grain of sand is he didn't have high expectations to begin with. We had just hoped to be able to have a rotational player, and he certainly is not able to be a rotational player, at least not how the fans need him and not how the Nuggets needed him when they lost Aaron Gordon. It was too much of a leap to expect him to go out there and to be able to, provide that offensive punch that Gordon provides, or even the defensive punch either. So to me, I don't necessarily. I'm not saying advocating they've got to move away from him, because I think he's probably going to still be here unless they find kind of put him in the end of a backside of a trade. But he's not going to move the needle for me one way or the other if he's here next year or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll agree with you again. I don't think he met his expectations in 2025, 2026. But again, it's just tough to make that judgment for a guy who only gets 12 minutes per game. Do I want him back on the team again? I honestly would love to see him as a part of some sort of deal. Obviously, right? We've kind of wanted him to be. I don't know about you. I won't speak for you, but the Nuggets fans I've interacted with over the last season or two have definitely wanted him to be a part of some sort of deal, not only to free up cap space, but also just to give him, like you said, an opportunity somewhere else to maybe hear different voices, learn different things, and maybe refine his skill set a little bit more so that he can fit into some NBA team's offensive scheme and defensive scheme somewhere else in the league, because the dude has a ton of physical talent, right? 6'9", I think he is, right? He's 6'10", 240 pounds. Like, that is a really nice size for a guy. He's really worked on his physical condition over the last few years as well, put on significant muscle in an attempt to be better. And so do I think his performance last season improved his trade value significantly? I don't think so. But I mean, if there was a team that was willing to take him in some sort of deal, if anything, just to free up cap space, I would totally do that deal if I was Denver, like maybe for a 2nd round pick or something, if someone was willing to give you a 2nd round pick for Zeke Naji. So yeah, I don't think I would like to see him on the team again in 2026, 2027. If I had the option, but he, I think, has 2 more years under contract this upcoming season and in the season after that. So it kind of just is what it is, at this point, which is unfortunate for both Zeke and the Nuggets combined. So tough situation overall. But with that said, let's transition into a player who has a significant upside, at least at this point in his career, who I personally think Nuggets fans should be pretty excited about, assuming he stays on the team. That person is Deron Holmes. Okay. Obviously, he was the Nuggets' 1st round pick 2 years ago. Missed all of his rookie season, officially his rookie season, the season he was drafted, because of a torn Achilles, I believe it was. Came back healthy in 2025, 2026. Played most of the season in the G League and played really well in the G League. Got some minutes with the big squad, the Nuggets team in 2025, 2026 as well. Played 25 games, averaged 4 points per game, shot 51% from the field and 44% from three, 79% from the free throw line, averaged about a rebound and a half a game. Round up, give him an assist per game, less than a steal and a block a game. Overall, a plus minus of minus 0.6. Here's the interesting thing about Holmes, though. When we're talking about Nuggets forwards and bigs in particular, only 26% of his shots were from 2-point range. 74% of his shots were from behind the arc. Very, very interesting. And most of those were catch and shoot, by the way. 75% of those shots were catch and shoot. What do we think of DaRon Holmes? DaRon Holmes finds himself in a very interesting situation, don't we think?
100%. I mean, look, so sometimes guys just kind of fly under the radar a little bit until, when we get to this point in the year and we start to break down numbers and kind of look at the tape and the highlights and things like that. I will raise my hand and say, I did not know that he went 20 for 45 from behind the arc. That is extremely impressive to me. The fact that he shot, 44% from behind the arc. Now, granted, that's a pretty small sample size. He was 11 of 16 from 2 points. So, you nailed it. He shot 74% of his shots from behind the arc. That's kind of a sign of the times, right? With what today's stretch bigs kind of do. For Holmes, though, to me, he still is kind of a guy. Look, you can kind of throw away that rookie year. He just got to be around the team. He had a torn Achilles. There wasn't any games or anything like that. But then this year, you almost treat this year as his rookie year. And what's clear is he can shoot. He can shoot the ball at a high clip. And that's, one of the things that I think intrigues the Nuggets. I don't think you're going to look at DaRon Holmes as a guy who's going to come in and be a defensive stopper, or, he's not going to be the highlight reel dunker like Aaron Gordon. But, if you're looking for a guy who, I don't want to say Michael Porter Jr. because they're different body styles, different body types. But I'm extremely intrigued to see what he could do with more minutes. If you just use his time in the G League as kind of a barometer to what he may be able to do in the NBA. Now, I get it. Defensive schemes are different. The lights are brighter. So it's not necessarily the same game, but usually if somebody can shoot, they can shoot. It doesn't matter what gym you're in. And to me, it's extremely clear he's got the ability to put the ball in the hoop from behind the arc, and that I think is something that is going to keep him on the Nuggets. It's when you're playing with somebody like Nikola Jokic, you've got to have people who can space the floor and knock down open shots. That's what we are looking for when we're looking for guys in the off season, essentially. And who knows, we may have a guy in our back pocket that kind of already fits that mold. Again, yeah. I don't want to put too much expectation on what he's going to be able to do athletically. He just doesn't seem like a super athletic type of guy. But if you're just looking for a shooter, I think he certainly fits that mold.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned his time in the G League. Here were his numbers in 13 games played in the G League. 21 points per game, 51% from the field, 38% from 3-point range on 5.5 attempts per game. Yeah. 87% from the free throw line, 8 rebounds a game, 4 assists per game, about 2 turnovers a game, more than a block per game, by the way, and a plus minus of 5.9. So, I mean, dude has some skills. That's not really debatable. And so, yeah, I think it's a question of, can he get strong enough to crack into the rotation in 2026, 2027? You did notice that in the minutes that he got a lot during his rookie season last season. He just was completely undersized to play 4 in the NBA. Yep. Now, I mean, there was that one game he got to start. He didn't really play a ton of minutes in that game overall, but he got to start that one game against the 76ers, the game that the Nuggets miraculously won with like pretty much their all third string and G League roster on the court. But I mean, Joel Embiid in that game just completely bodied him up. Now, I mean, Joel Embiid is massive, and DaRon Holmes is not technically a 5, but I mean, you kind of saw similar tendencies against other 4s when he got playing time at the 4. So that said, he definitely does need to get stronger. That's something we say about every young player who has ever played pretty much in the NBA. But yeah, he's a very intriguing piece. So with that said, did he meet expectations in 2025, 2026? And do you want him back on the team again in 2026, 2027?
I would say he did. I would say slightly, but he slightly exceeded expectations because I don't know how high the bar was for him coming off of a torn Achilles. I thought, me personally, I thought this would be more of a developmental type of year for him. So the fact that he came in, he really opened my eyes to him being able to shoot the ball. I did not think he was going to be able to shoot that well. You mentioned, his rebounding down when he was in the G League, 8 rebounds a game. That's, that I don't think that necessarily translates to what he's going to be able to do full time in the NBA if he was a rotational piece, but it tells you that he does have kind of some of that scrappiness to get in there and to average a block a game too. He does have some of that in him. So I think that to me is enough to say, hey, let's bring him back. Let's continue to see what we can build with him. And let's just really hope that the Nuggets, coaching staff and developmental team can work with him and kind of mold him into, exactly what they want, because I think he's in the perfect situation. He's in that kind of Jokic, quote unquote, Jokic system. And it gives the Nuggets something to work with. So I'm a big fan of his. I'd love to see him back next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll agree with you yet again. I think he met expectations, slightly exceeded expectations, because I did not have him shooting like 44% from the 3-point line in however many attempts he got at the NBA level. Solid skill set, even coming off of a torn Achilles, by the way. And so all that put together, I think he's got some pretty solid potential to be a solid, at a minimum, role player in this league. As far as do I want him on the team again in 2026, 2027? I think I do. Now, the reason at the outset I said something to the effect of, if he's on the team in 2026, 2027, is because I saw this interesting mock trade I think a week or two ago. I'm not sure if you saw it, but there is this proposed trade that I'm sure a lot of Nuggets fans would be very intriguingly hesitant and not wanting to make, even though it makes sense on paper, but just because of the team it's with, you're just a little bit frustrated with it. I saw someone propose a straight up trade, 1-for-1, DaRon Holmes to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Terrence Shannon Jr. Now, I don't know if you'd be able to get Minnesota #1 to make that trade. Terrence Shannon Jr. had a phenomenal first round series for a rookie, who kind of just got called up into the rotation on short notice. And so his stock, relatively speaking, as another young player is extremely high, significantly higher than DaRon Holmes. I get that the Nuggets do need some guard depth, obviously, and Terrence Shannon would, I think, be a pretty solid fit on this team, for just the way he plays, and the fact that he is a guard who can get into the paint, who can create shots, etc. But there's just no way that trade is even reasonable. But that said, DaRon Holmes might be a solid trade piece again if you're trying to maybe get rid of someone like a Christian Brown, and the team is like, yeah, that's a not so good contract. We're going to need just maybe a little bit more if we're going to take that on fully. Hey, can we have DaRon Holmes? Then I might be like, all right, fine. I think he has enough value to the point where I'd be willing to get rid of him for that type of reason. If you were to clear up Christian Brown's type of contract and get rid of DaRon Holmes, that's fine. But aside from that, I do think that I would like him kind of similar to Spencer Jones, honestly, to be a key rotational player at a minimum off the bench for this team, because the Nuggets need solid 3-and-D guys on this team. Spencer Jones is one of those guys. I think Deron Holmes could potentially grow into that type of player, even if the emphasis is more on the 3 than on the D. But yeah, that's Deron Holmes the second. Also, he's the second, just like me. So, I'm an extra fan for that reason. Got to support the seconds out here. But that said, moving on to our fourth player, I think let's talk about Jonas Valanciunas next. We gotta get to our favorite player last, obviously, last but not least. So we'll talk about Jonas Valanciunas first. Brought in the offseason to be a solid backup 5 with playoff experience, with championship experience, I believe, too, with Toronto. Just a guy who can be a solid bully ball type of backup center who could potentially fit into some similar offensive schemes that Nikola Jokic runs. And the jury might kind of be out on how that went in 2025, 2026 with Big Val. So in 2025, 2026, Jonas played 65 games, averaged 9 points per game, 58% from the field, 31% from 3 on very few attempts, 77% from the free throw line, 5 rebounds per game, just over an assist per game, about a half a block per game, less than half a steal per game, and a plus minus of negative 0.7. Obviously, as a center who didn't take a ton of jump shots or shots from behind the arc in 2025, 2026, he shot 93% of his shots from inside the 3-point line and 6.7 or 7% of his shots from behind the 3-point line. So that said, what do we think about Jonas Valanciunas? Kind of a very interesting situation played out with him during the course of the season, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, Valanciunas, Big Val, was brought in for one really specific reason. Some people could call it a problem that the Nuggets have had in the years past, but I don't think there's been a real backup center to Jokic really ever since he's kind of hit MVP form. Um, Jokic carries so much of this offense, and we've talked about it a lot. Where he gets tired, and he's all everything, but he needs some help. We need to be able to find somebody who can go in there and those non-Jokic minutes that they always talk about. We need somebody who can go in and not be pushed around underneath as a center, but still be able to hold their own with regards to scoring and being able to play, good defense, solid defense, rebound the ball. And so all of those things Val really, really did. I mean, we didn't expect him to come in here and be, a dominant force. It was, like I said, it was really just to survive those non-Jokic minutes. And I think he did do a good job at that. Kind of the parts where you start to scratch your head. I know he did deal with a little injury this season, but it wasn't anything that kept him out like for significant periods of time. But you look at the year before, 24-25, he split time between Washington and Sacramento, but he played 81 games. He averaged 18 minutes a game and 10 points a game. You fast forward to last year with the Nuggets, he played in 65 games, as you mentioned, averaged just over 13 minutes per game and just under 9 points per game. So there was a drop off there. And it makes me question, is Val one of those guys who it kind of makes sense, you play more minutes, you're going to put up more points and things like that. But is Val one of those guys that needs to play, a consistent 18 to 20 minutes a game to really get his motor running and to see the best of what he has to offer? And I think that's where the Nuggets kind of struggled, because you just didn't see Adelman being willing to have both Val and Joker on the court at the same time. We saw it maybe a handful of times, but I think from a coaching standpoint, on the defensive end, they just became too slow. They didn't have the ability to guard the perimeter if both Val and Joker were in there. So that became difficult. And because of that, it shortened the amount of minutes that Val was able to play. And thus, I think you didn't really get to see the full, as good as Val could have been when he was in there. So I really liked the signing. I was super excited for it in the offseason last year. I think he's clearly heads and shoulders the best backup center that we've had in the Jokic years. I just wish his minutes would have been handled a little bit differently, so we could have maybe seen a little bit more out of him.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost felt like it wasn't fully a scheme fit the way that the team thought it would be.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not sure if they wanted to bring him in with the intention of playing the double bigs lineup regularly. That would have been very, very interesting. But at a minimum, yeah. And what is it? And overall, what does that say about the league in general right now? It says that the Nuggets are what they are, or at least what they were in 2025, 2026, which was the fifth oldest team in the league. And you kind of saw, like you just mentioned, the slowness factor. Like, it's not that Val is bad. Now, Val is getting into his mid 30s now. He's 34 years old. But it's not that Val was necessarily bad. It's just that he didn't really provide enough athleticism and enough of a fit within the offensive system to justify him playing important minutes when they needed it most. I'm thinking about the playoffs in particular. The fact that they were playing against a team that had a lot of bigs that the Nuggets really did need to do something with and do something against. And Val didn't get significant playing time really at all. Speaks to just how they didn't feel like he was athletic enough to really fit in and play a solid role against someone like a Julius Randle, obviously, who's kind of more of a four. Someone like a Rudy Gobert, I guess, but Rudy Gobert really only played the minutes that Jokic played. And so he was kind of just theoretically going to be out there to guard Naz Reid or Julius Randle, and he's just not fast enough or athletic enough to keep up with either of those types of guys. Same type of thing with the guys in the rest of the league. And so I liked the Val signing because I really did feel like he would be able to fit into the scheme a little bit better. They tried to use him like they used Jokic more so earlier on in the season. That just didn't really work. Val isn't the same type of shooting threat that Joker is. And so his whole game really centers around being a bullier in the paint. And considering the Nuggets do an awful lot of back cuts and stuff, Val's passing wasn't necessarily good enough either, to the point where you were like, yeah, he can really fit into the scheme in the similar type of way that Nikola Jokic runs this offense when he's on the court. So tough situation for Val. Overall, wasn't really a fit, wasn't really athletic enough, kind of getting older. It was a good move in the offseason. I still think it kind of was a move that wasn't fully explored where it potentially could have been, especially in the playoffs when you needed it most. But I mean, overall, you in looking back on it, you can understand why some of those rotational decisions were made with Val. But as far as his expectations, did he meet expectations in 2025, 2026? And do you want him back on the team again in 2026, 2027?
I would say he probably met the regular season expectations, probably just to the bare minimum, I think. But I think he met the expectations. But certainly when it came to playoffs, he barely played. So I would say that was kind of a bummer. And I agree 100% with you. I just don't think the fit, from a scheme standpoint was there. So, I'm not blaming him. I don't, it's hard to be put into the middle of a scheme where these guys, you're talking Joker and Jamal, have played together for such a long period of time. And it's kind of like a smooth running machine. When you put a new piece in there and they don't fit, well, he's supposed to be your big. So we're going to try to smash that, round peg through the square hole to make it fit. And that just kind of seemed what they tried to do. As far as him coming back, look, the way that his contract is structured, I think that you can get out of it and only owe him $2 million of the $10 million that's guaranteed this year, if I'm not mistaken. If they move on from him, I think they probably move on from him, save the $8 million, let him go off to Europe and finish his career in Europe. That seems to be where he wants to be. And, certainly wish him well. It's not with any ill wishes or anything like that. I think he came in, he did what he was kind of asked to do in the limited period of time that he got. And, then, it's just kind of turned the page, at least in my opinion. That's kind of how I think we handle him.
Yeah. Once again, I'm going to be right there on the same page with you. As far as his expectations, yeah, I think he met his expectations overall in the opportunities that he was given. Right, he played the way that you kind of thought he would play. It's not really his fault that he couldn't play more of a Jokic-like role in this offense. He's never really been that type of player throughout the course of his career, and so it was kind of a stretch to bring him in with the explicit intention of making him that type of guy here. And so he did his job. He was out there to go get rebounds, to be a big, solid presence who can bully in the paint, who can set good screens, and really contribute to the pick and roll aspect. And obviously, the heavy rebounding emphasis that this team has had over the last few seasons. So I think he met his expectations overall. As far as do I want him back on the team next season? Your explanation is exactly what mine was going to be, pretty much word for word. So I don't think I want him back on the team next season. I think it's actually kind of unfortunate now that we stole him from the team that he wanted to go play for last offseason, just for him to play throughout the regular season, see his minutes get restricted towards the back end of the season, and then just effectively not play at all in the postseason, which is pretty much why we got him in the first place. So I think this is the offseason to let him go. You're right. The Nuggets can save about $8 million if they do some specific release with him at some point during this offseason. And so, yeah, I think release him, save your money, let him go play in Europe where he's wanted to play for the last year at least. And everyone should be overall happy with that situation. So, yeah, it is what it is with Jonas Valanciunas. We got a comment here, a few comments generally related to the same Jonas Valanciunas topic. Yeah, Alvin not playing Jokic that much in the playoffs was really disappointing. But at the same time, neither Jokic or Val can defend the perimeter at a high level. And I think that's why Adelman did that and not playing Val that much. Yeah. And this person would also want him back on the team, but he's most likely not going to come back. Yeah. So overall, fair enough. Yeah, he's not a good perimeter defender like Nikola Jokic. And so this is really the tough thing, right? The Nuggets just lacked athleticism and length ultimately when they needed it most. It's what doomed them against the Timberwolves. And unfortunately, Val couldn't contribute more positively on that in that type of manner, right? Just based on his current situation and the point in his career that he's in. So nice to see that everyone here is aligned with Jonas Valanciunas. Unfortunate as it might be in some sense. But I'll tell you what's not unfortunate. Us getting to discuss the last player on this roster that we haven't really talked about yet. Yeah, we didn't really get to KJ Simpson, or David Roddy. They didn't really play very much this season anyway. So other than that, we've talked about just about every other player. And what better way to wrap up our discussion on the Nuggets roster than by talking about the big 1-5 himself, Nikola Jokic. Where do we start with Nikola? Man, led the league in rebounds, led the league in assists, led the league in triple doubles, had over 2 times as many triple doubles as the second highest triple doubles accumulator in 2025-2026. Led the Nuggets to a top 4 seed in the Western Conference yet again, despite all the injuries that this team played through in 2025-2026. And with the following stat line, okay, in 65 games played, 28 points per game, 57% from the field, 38% from three, 83% from the free throw line, 13 rebounds a game, 11 assists per game, pretty high on the turnovers at just about 4, but over a steal a game, roughly a block per game, and a plus minus of 8.5. Most of Nikola's shots obviously come from inside the arc. 74% of his shots were 2-pointers. 26% of them were 3-pointers. Eric, I mean, 3-time MVP. You've said multiple times, should be a 6-time MVP. Where do we start with Nikola Jokic, man?
I mean, I hope that the people in Denver and around the league, it doesn't just have to be Denver fans, but I hope that you guys all realize what we are watching is it's like the golden goat. This is not something that anybody else in the next probably outside of, I mean, Wemby has a chance, right? But I don't think Wemby has the passing ability that Jokic has. But the complete game that Jokic has, it is so special. And the fact that we're able to get to, have the privilege to get to watch him play and lead this team, I get it. He's only won one championship. So, from a national standpoint, he's probably going to get dinged for that. In the era that we live in, you've got to win multiple championships to be considered one of the greatest of all time. But I wrote this down. Just listen to this. So, this was what I wrote down as far as what Nikola Jokic's expectations were, what the expectations were for him. The expectation was for him to be an MVP candidate, to run the best offense in basketball, to carry the team through injuries, to rebound everything, to create for everyone, and to still be the best player in every single playoff series that the Nuggets go through. For any other player in the league, I don't care who it is, at this current date, that bar would be impossible for any other player. But for Jokic, it's just the job description. That shows you how special he is. And I mean, it doesn't matter what stat you want to break down. The turnovers. Okay, so let's talk about the turnovers. I think there are games where he gets extremely frustrated, and you can see it. You can see it in his body language, right? Because his mind is so many steps ahead, right? He sees the court better than anybody, maybe in the history of the game. He knows where guys should be before the play is even run. And so, for a guy whose mind works like that, when his teammates aren't in the right place, or something breaks down, you can see his frustrations. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, so to say. And so, look, for a guy who is, we'll call him 7 feet, probably around 275, 290 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. The fact that he is handling the ball at the clip that he handles it, where the fact that he touches the ball essentially every single possession, you're going to get turnovers. That's just going to happen. Point guards get turnovers. He's a center. He's not supposed to be the guy that handles the ball as much as he does. So, the other stats, I mean, his points dipped a little bit this season compared to last season. I think he dropped from roughly 29 and a half, almost 30 a game to 28. So it wasn't a huge drop. But his rebounding went up, his assists went up, his steals went up. So look, I don't know how much more we can expect out of Jokic every single year. He's averaged a triple double for 2 or 3 straight seasons. I can't remember. And I have been on record. You're 100% right, Chris. I've been on record as saying certainly not. I feel like he should be the 6-time defending MVP. It's taking nothing away from Shea. It's taking nothing away, from the other guys in the league. I think he absolutely got robbed one season by Embiid in the 76ers. I think that was Jokic's MVP. He should have won that one. So that would have given him 4. And then it's hard to argue with Shea because OKC has just been so good, dominant over the last couple of years. So I get it. You talk about voter fatigue. I think voter fatigue is one of the lamest excuses in the world. When a guy goes out there and produces at the numbers that he's producing, if you take Jokic off the Nuggets are not going to be, probably not even a playoff team. They would struggle to be a play-in team. That's kind of my opinion. If you just removed him from the team. If you took Shea off of OKC, I'm going to bet you they're probably still in the top 5, certainly are within the play-in. They're just that deep and that solid. So to me, that's how you measure MVP. You don't measure it based on who's the best player on the best team. Jokic, hands down, if you took a poll of players around the NBA, if you took a poll of coaches around the NBA, Jokic is the best player in the world. And the fact that he's doing it here in Denver, for me, it's been a sight to see. I can't even describe to you guys how how special it is to be able to, anytime we get the opportunity to go down to the Pepsi Center and see a game in person, to know that it's kind of like, hey, you're watching somebody. I grew up in the Michael Jordan era. So I'm not putting him on that level of Michael Jordan, but you're watching the Denver Nuggets version of Michael Jordan play in real time, and it's just been a treat. And I hope we don't take it for granted, because he's one of a kind, and I can't say enough about him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is all, by the way, considering the fact that until Jamal last season, he had never had an all-star teammate in the same season on his team, which is absolutely crazy to think about. I think I saw something that's the exact opposite that is true about James Harden. I saw a post like that the other day. All the different all-star pairings that he's played with over the course of his career, and still no championship. Nikola is the exact opposite. He has a championship and has only played one season with an all-star teammate who was an all-star in that season that they played together. It's absolutely dominant. That's just what he is. He's just the best player of a generation, quite honestly. Jason Kidd has him top 5 all time at a minimum by the end of his career, at a maximum right now, which is kind of funny. I think Nikola at this point is definitely top 10 all time. No one has done the things that he's done with the efficiency that he's done it at, with the role that he's played on his team in that process. He literally is the center of everything that this team has been since probably at a minimum 2018, 2019, right? And so it's just hard to have all that pressure on you as that guy who is like the center of everything. When you come out of the game, your team literally cannot function the same way. It's just, that is absolutely crazy. It just does not happen very frequently with other guys. And so, I mean, the fact that he's consistently one of the leaders in plus minus and also on off differential, it just shows how valuable he truly is. And so there's a reason why when we say stuff, or when you say stuff that I agree with, at least, like he should be a 6-time MVP. That's not necessarily hyperbole. Obviously, we understand that that's not necessarily the most reasonable claim in the world. But I mean, dude, is there any clearer definition of value than that? Than the fact that when you take this guy off the court, his team becomes a completely different team in terms of play style, in terms of ability to succeed in just literally every single way possible. That seems like the definition of value. And Nikola is the best player in the league. Shea might be the MVP yet again. It's because he plays on a 60-win team and has all-star teammates. He has had them for the last 2 seasons now, and has a really solid young athletic team with a good scheme, very modern approach. So that's fine. It's understandable. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting the things that Nikola gets flamed for. He's always gotten flamed for his defense, which he's significantly improved over the course of his career. Not the biggest blocks guy for a center, but he's always up at the top of the league in deflections, and he gets his hands in there for a lot of steals as well. And so he finds ways to make himself useful on the defensive end. He gets flamed more recently for never playing on a 60-win team, and more specifically, never beating a team that even had 50 wins, I think, in the playoffs or something to that effect. And so it's like, we're having to invent new reasons to explain why Nikola is really not great. And that says all I think it needs to say about how incredible he's been. So obviously, I don't even think we need to ask this question of Nikola on this podcast, but do you think he met expectations in 2025, 2026? And do you want him on the team again in 2026, 2027?
There's no doubt about it. Look, the guy is the first ever player to lead the league in both rebounds and assists in the same season. So yeah, he met expectations. He exceeded expectations. I mean, look, the things that you say about him just can go on and on and on. Next season, barring some sort of catastrophic injury, he's, probably in the first 20 to 25 games of the season, he's going to pass, Russ for the all-time leading triple doubles, being the all-time leader in triple doubles. I want to remind you guys, he's 7 feet tall. He's a center. He's going to be the all-time leader in triple doubles in the history of the NBA. That is mind-blowing. So yeah, I want him on the team. I want him on the team until he doesn't want to play anymore. I don't ever want to hear a story about how he got traded to the Lakers or to, how he wants to go play with somebody else. That's not who Jokic is. I know the people in LA love to make up these fantasy stories. Oh, he wants to come play with Luka. Well, I think Jokic is the kind of guy who you can see it in the fact that he likes to go back to Serbia in the offseason and ride horses. You think a guy like that wants to go deal with LA? He wants to go be in the spotlight. I don't think that's who he is just as a person. So, I think Denver is the perfect fit for him. He's been on record as saying multiple times he wants to finish his career as a Nugget. Why can't we just take a person at their word when they say something like that? That's who he is. That's what he wants to be. I know there's a giant contract extension he's probably going to sign sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we can put that all aside and put it to bed and hopefully finish his career without having to have those conversations every year.
Yep. Yeah, spot on. And I'm going to make my answer this the shortest answer that one can possibly give. Did he meet expectations? Yes, absolutely. He always meets and exceeds expectations over the course of the last several seasons. Do I want him on the team again in 2027? Yes, obviously. This is his team. It just is. As long as he's in the league, this is his team. And that's why this offseason is so imperative for the Denver Nuggets. You have to build a championship caliber team at whatever cost necessary so that you can succeed with a top 10 player of all time on your roster. That doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen every day. You need to maximize it because this guy is absolutely special and needs to have the last few seasons of his career maximized now that he's in his early 30s. As far as comments on this, top 15 all time. I think he's definitely a top 5 center of all time, though. Okay, yeah, fair enough. There's an argument to be made for that just based on collective team success that some other guys in that top 10, top 15 conversation have had. But I mean, ultimately, he's still got a solid 5 or so years to just give it an opportunity to win at least one more championship, maybe 2. But it really just depends on whether or not they can put the right team around him. But overall, that's something we'll get into the next couple of weeks now that we start moving into free agency and the draft coming up in the end of June. Obviously, the NBA Finals are going on right now. But as far as the bigs are concerned, now we've walked through the whole roster. As far as the bigs are concerned, any final takeaways that you got for us, Eric, on these 2 position groups, the power forwards and the centers?
No, I mean, the final take is look at team chemistry. That's one of the things I don't think we really touched on too much in this big conversation. Team chemistry is a big deal. And I think Aaron Gordon is one of those pieces. When you look at team chemistry, he's a big piece to this team's overall chemistry. So it's a very interesting offseason for the Denver Nuggets to see, what kind of moves they can make, what's the team going to look like next year. And if I can get on my soapbox for just 1 second, I'm looking and talking to Stan and Josh Kroenke. Guys, if we have to pay a luxury tax, let's pay the luxury tax. You guys can afford it. We've seen enough, enough sports around Denver to know when we've found something special. Let's try to get as many championships as we can with Joker and, whatever that supporting cast is.
Yeah. You guys can afford a luxury tax for 6 or 7 or so seasons, right?
Exactly.
It's just a few seasons, just make it happen. That's a good point about the chemistry. That's not something we talked a ton about. As far as this group in general, a lot of very interesting play styles and contributions in these two position groups. You got arguably your best two-way player at the 4, but he can't stay healthy. You got a potentially up-and-coming, promising young forward, probably a 4, who's a good shooter. We'll see if he can add defense to that 3-and-D play style. You've got a guy who had some promise early in his career, who's got a lot of physical tools, but who just hasn't fit into this team and in our scheme. You got a guy who came here for one season, probably one season only, and it kind of failed because of just the nature of the challenges that this team has from an athleticism perspective. And that was unfortunate and kind of unseen in terms of the impact that would have. Then you've got obviously the best player in the world. And so very, very interesting combination of bigs that this team has. It'll be interesting to see how this rotation looks in 2027, just with at least you figure one of those guys gone. Ideally, maybe you get rid of Najee and that's 2 of those guys gone. Maybe you throw in Holmes in a deal of some sort to add depth elsewhere, and that's 3 of those guys gone. So this position group, while having one of the most intriguing combinations of contributors, will be a very interesting position group to watch this offseason as well, with a lot of shakeup that might occur in free agency, the draft even, and trade and free agency. So we'll see how it all pans out. But with that said, if you've listened thus far, thank you for listening to this episode. This completes our walkthrough of the 2025-2026 Denver Nuggets roster. We hope you enjoyed those episodes. Like I said earlier on the podcast, we will be off next week. Eric is taking some time off to go on vacation, and I will be joining him, not literally on his vacation, but by taking the week off. So we'll see you in 2 weeks with a draft preview episode for the Denver Nuggets. And at that point in time, we should also know who the NBA Finals champion is. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. That might have implications on what we think the Nuggets need in the draft. So join us in 2 weeks for that episode. Ultimately, we hope you enjoyed this one. And till then, take care and peace out.